The Caribbean sun beat down on the turquoise waters off the coast of Venezuela, a stark contrast to the tension brewing beneath the surface. It was May 3rd, 2020. On the shadowy shores of Macuto, a small group of armed men, including 2 former American Green Berets, stealthily approached in fishing boats. Their mission, codenamed Operation Gideon, was audacious, almost cinematic, to infiltrate the country, capture President Nicolás Maduro, and trigger a nationwide uprising. This wasn't a Hollywood script. It was a real-life gamble, a bizarre and ultimately doomed chapter in the long and complicated saga of US-Venezuela relations under President Donald Trump. The plot, backed by a Florida-based security company and allegedly linked to Venezuelan opposition figures, would unravel in a hail of gunfire and arrests, leaving behind a trail of questions that led directly back to Washington, D.C. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Cosmic Conquerors channel. Before we start, I hope you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you receive all the new content. And also share this story with your friends so it reaches as many people as possible. If you have a story, write it in the comments. Maybe we'll choose it for the next video. Let's begin the story. Pay close attention because there is a tiny detail that might completely change your perspective on history. The story of the Trump administration's intense focus on Venezuela is one of high-stakes diplomacy, crippling economic warfare, and clandestine plots. It began not with a bang, but with a steady escalation of rhetoric and sanctions. When Donald Trump entered the White House in 2017, Venezuela was already deep in a spiraling crisis. Years of economic mismanagement, corruption, and hyperinflation under Nicolás Maduro had plunged the once wealthy oil nation into chaos, leading to widespread shortages of food and medicine and triggering a massive refugee crisis. The Trump administration saw both a humanitarian disaster and a geopolitical opportunity. From the outset, the administration signaled a tougher stance. In August 2017, Trump made a statement that sent shockwaves through Latin America. He declared he was not going to rule out a military option to resolve the Venezuelan crisis. While many at the time dismissed it as bluster, it was a clear indication of the aggressive posture his administration would take. This rhetoric was quickly followed by action. The US, as the sanctions tighten their grip on the Venezuelan economy. Us? What? Y'all? Man, you feel me? Imposed a series of escalating sanctions targeting the Maduro regime. These weren't just targeted sanctions against individuals. They were designed to cripple the Venezuelan economy by cutting off its access to US financial markets and targeting its lifeblood, the state-owned oil company, PDVSA. Executive orders in 2017 and 2018 prohibited transactions in Venezuelan debt and the country's new digital currency. By January 2019, the Trump administration had dropped a financial bombshell, effectively blocking PDVSA from exporting oil to the United States and freezing billions of dollars in its US assets. The goal was clear: to suffocate the Maduro government financially and force a change in leadership. The political front of this pressure campaign reached its zenith on January 23, 2019. On that day, Juan Guaidó, the young leader of Venezuela's opposition-controlled National Assembly, stood before a massive crowd in Caracas and declared himself the country's interim president, citing a constitutional provision. Within minutes, President Trump officially recognized Guaidó as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. The move was a direct challenge to Maduro's authority and was quickly followed by a chorus of other Western and Latin American nations. The administration's rationale was that Maduro's 2018 re-election had been a sham, rendering his presidency illegitimate. By recognizing Guaidó, the US hoped to galvanize the Venezuelan opposition and create a viable alternative to Maduro's rule.
To spearhead this aggressive new policy, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo appointed a controversial figure, Elliott Abrams. A veteran of the Reagan and George W. Bush administrations, Abrams was a neoconservative hawk with a long and storied history in Latin America, including a conviction for misleading Congress during the Iran-Contra affair. His appointment as special representative for Venezuela was a clear signal that the Trump administration was serious about regime change. Abrams, along with other hardliners like Senator Marco Rubio, became the driving force behind the maximum pressure campaign. As the sanctions tightened their grip on the Venezuelan economy, the humanitarian crisis deepened. While the administration argued that the sanctions were targeted at the regime and not the people, the reality on the ground was far more complex.
It was in this atmosphere of stalemate and frustration that the bizarre plot of Operation Gideon was hatched. Led by Jordan Goudreau, a former Green Beret and founder of the private security firm Silvercorp USA, the plan was to train a small force of Venezuelan army deserters in Colombia for a clandestine amphibious raid. Goudreau claimed to have a contract with the Guaidó-led opposition, a claim they later disputed. He also alleged that he had the tacit support of US officials, having met with some at Trump properties in Washington and Florida. The Trump administration, however, vehemently denied any involvement. The operation was a catastrophic failure. Venezuelan intelligence had infiltrated the group, and authorities were waiting for them. Several of the would-be insurgents were killed, and the rest, including the 2 Americans, were captured. Maduro's government paraded the captured Americans on state television, presenting the failed raid as proof of a US-backed plot to overthrow him. The incident, dubbed the Bay of Piglets, was a major embarrassment for the Venezuelan opposition and raised serious questions about the extent of US knowledge and involvement. Despite the denials, reports later emerged suggesting that US intelligence was aware of the plot but failed to stop it. In the final year of his presidency, Trump continued to exert pressure on Venezuela. His administration indicted Maduro and other high-ranking officials on charges of narco-terrorism, offering a $15 million reward for information leading to his capture.
Warships were deployed to the Caribbean in what was described as a counter-narcotics operation, further ratcheting up the tension. On his last full day in office, in a final gesture, President Trump granted deferred and forced departure to thousands of Venezuelans living in the US, protecting them from deportation. It was a complex and often contradictory policy, driven by a mix of geopolitical ambitions, domestic political considerations, particularly winning votes in Florida, and the influence of hard-line advisors. The maximum pressure campaign succeeded in isolating the Maduro regime and exacerbating its economic woes, but it failed in its ultimate goal of bringing about a democratic transition. Maduro remained in power, and the Venezuelan people were left to bear the brunt of a deepening humanitarian crisis. The story of Trump and Venezuela is a cautionary tale about the limits of American power and the unintended consequences of aggressive foreign policy. The long-term impact of the Trump administration's Venezuela policy is still being debated. The crippling sanctions remain largely in place, though the Biden administration has shown some willingness to ease them in exchange for democratic reforms. The Venezuelan economy is in ruins, and its people continue to suffer. The political stalemate between the Maduro government and the opposition persists, with no clear path to a resolution. The maximum pressure campaign ultimately failed to achieve its primary objective of ousting Maduro. Instead, it arguably pushed him closer to US adversaries like Russia and China, and gave him a powerful narrative to rally his supporters against foreign intervention. What was the most shocking fact you learned from this story? And with that, we've reached the end of the story. But stories don't end here.
If you liked this one, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories. And if something caught your attention, leave it in the comments and let's discuss it together. I'll be waiting for your opinions. See you in the next story. Goodbye.